This is episode 1 of us nitpicking Peppa Pig episodes for your enjoyment.
Today, we're doing the episode titled Pedro is Late because it just doesn't make sense.
So, let's just begin with the first scene of the episode.
The sun seems to be in a position that the time is approximately 9 to 10 a.m. Just keep that in mind for later.
Pedro is asleep in his little bed.
It's not a little bed. It's just not. Now if we take a look around Pedro's room, there are many things that are just a bit wacky. First of all, something that makes sense. Pedro's clock says that it is 9 a.m., which does make sense with the sun's position.
Now, you see that this train is a little bit too wide for the tracks, not to mention that it has been completely derailed off of the tracks.
His clown shoes are absurdly flat, and I'm talking pancake flat, even when compared with everyone else's shoes in this universe.
Can I just take a minute to recognize how terribly bad his drawings on the wall are? I mean, just take one look at that super potato picture, and you know his dreams of being an artist are immediately crushed.
So now Pedro has gotten up and him and his mother are rushing to school to catch the bus. But Mummy Pony literally jumps the height of the car just to get in, and a seatbelt magically appears over her. Like, just watch this. Pedro defies physics as well.
I don't know why, but every place in Peppa Pig is high up on a hill, and Pedro and Mummy Pony must have gotten some serious speed going almost vertically down that hill. Also, they left the door open. Here come the burglars.
I just want to mention how sad it is how they missed the bus by literal seconds. The bus goes down the hill and Pedro immediately comes up. Sad times. Pedro proposes that
Maybe we're early.
But Mummy Pony swiftly replies with,
No, Pedro, we've missed the bus.
Peppa is being a bully as usual and teases Pedro about always being late. 5 seconds later, there is
The car chasing us.
and Pedro shows up behind them and his mother shouts,
Stop the bus! Pedro is here.
Pedro then hops out of his car, not even says goodbye to his mother, and apologizes to Madame Gazelle. After this, Madame Gazelle orders Miss Rabbit to drive to the museum.
Miss Rabbit then starts the bus and goes from 0 to 50 in less than half a second. I'm honestly very surprised that that bus's engine didn't explode at that very moment, so props to that bus. Also, nobody will ever know what those colored buttons on the dashboard do.
Madame Gazelle says,
Nothing can stop us now.
immediately followed by a parade of children led by Pedro, all needing to use the toilet. So, they stop at Granddad Dog's garage, where literally nothing makes sense.
First off, the sun is in a completely different position to when they embarked on this bus journey, and it is now roughly to p.m. Also, are those two beams strong enough to hold up this roof?
The bus stops at the petrol station and Granddad Dog asks,
Petrol or diesel?
Toilet, please.
Miss Rabbit does not respond. Get ghosted Granddad Dog. When the children get off the bus, Danny Dog and Rebecca Rabbit literally phase through a chair, and other characters appear out of the bus from nowhere. It is then followed by this conversation.
Are you sure you wouldn't like any petrol?
No, we haven't gone anywhere yet.
All the students and Madame Gazelle had entered the toilet building at 2 minutes 6 seconds in the video and are shown to walk out at 2 minutes 10 seconds in the video. Are you trying to tell me that all these students went to the toilet and possibly washed their hands? You never know with these kids in under for seconds. Also, I don't think this building is big enough to have even one toilet, let alone however many children there are, which is 13 to be precise.
The students then return to the bus where they return to their journey. Except they don't, because Pedro gets left behind at the petrol station, staring at the petrol and diesel pumps and says this.
Interesting.
Granddad Dog sees Pedro get left behind and decides to get a nice viewing point of the action inside the bathroom. Luckily, Susie notices the absence of Pedro and mentions it to Madame Gazelle.
And as they drive off, it is shown that Granddad Dog was just standing outside of the petrol station, completely willing for Pedro to be left behind. Also, where is the sun in this scene? It's literally just not there. Miss Rabbit says,
I hope we get to the museum before it closes.
which is instantly jinxing herself because of what happens next.
Mr. Rabbit is locking up for the day.
The sun has returned, revealing that the current time is 3 p.m.
Madame Gazelle confronts Mr. Rabbit and asks if they could see the museum. Did they seriously not book a tour in advance? Madame Gazelle is slaking on the job. So, Mr. Rabbit takes them on an extremely quick and in detail tour that lasts not even 30 seconds.
This is the King and Queen's room, full of old stuff.
Pedro is being Pedro as usual. Mr. Rabbit then takes them through the final door, saying this.
And through this door is the most amazing place of all. It's the fantastic world you live in.
Then rudely shuts the door in the children's faces.
The children are preparing to leave to go back home when Susie, once again, asks,
Where is Pedro?
Madame Gazelle then almost has a heart attack and quickly rushes inside, which is quite strange considering that the door is locked. I wonder how she got in there. Pedro is found to be looking at a mollusk and says,
Very interesting.
Notice the picture on the left with the colored fossils, which we actually saw earlier, but in a completely different part of the wall. And as you can see, there is no mollusk to be seen where it is in the second shot. There is no explanation for this. It just doesn't make sense, but I guess this is Peppa Pig.
Pedro and Madame Gazelle exit the museum to find that the bus has driven off without them. All the children and Miss Rabbit obviously see Madame Gazelle go looking for Pedro, so it seems they might have done it on purpose. No Susie to save you now, Pedro. Madame Gazelle then says.
Miss Rabbit will realize she's left us behind.
Then the show cuts to the bus on the way back to school, with everyone singing the Bing Bong Bing song.
Bong, bing, boo. Bing, bong, bing. Bing, bong, bingly, bongly, boo.
All together now!
We then cut back to Madame Gazelle and Pedro, with Mr. Rabbit now leaving in his car. How the car got there so quickly, I have not a clue. Mr. Rabbit then turns and says to them,
Oh, have you missed the bus?
Yeah, right. Like you didn't see them before, walking out the door, right past them, and to your car. Madame Gazelle then announces,
Mr. Rabbit, I am a teacher. I need your car.
Then, very much illegally jumps into his car, with Pedro following suit, driving off with Mr. Rabbit having no way home. Poor guy. And then we see the sun, once again in a different position, showing that it is now 9 a.m. again. Were Madame Gazelle and Pedro standing out there all night? And what was Mr. Rabbit doing in the museum all this time? All these questions will never be answered as we now move on.
Madame Gazelle and Pedro then take a shortcut, driving down a side road, past the duck pond, and then magically arriving at the school, somehow before the bus did, when they had seemingly all night to make the journey, plus a head start in the morning. What took them so long?
Pedro and Madame Gazelle then jump out the car, where Pedro says,
Maybe we're early.
Madame Gazelle celebrates, stating that,
Yes, Pedro. For once, you are early.
although they are still definitely late, the bus then arrives with everybody else. As Mr. Rabbit's car completely disappears from the shot, it is just nowhere to be found.
Peppa jumps out of the bus and mockingly states,
Wow, Pedro is early.
Then Pedro makes the epic comeback and says in Peppa's face,
Yes, and you're late. You slow coaches.
Peppa seems unhappy with this response and obviously has not been rivaled before.
Everybody then falls over laughing as Mrs. Rabbit creepily watches over them. And Mr. Rabbit's car is back now, because why not?
And that's the episode. If you noticed anything else that doesn't make sense that we missed, comment it below. And if you want us to nitpick more Peppa Pig episodes, like and subscribe.
That's all, folks. Now roast us in the comments.